Gold is out this week with assay results from its Moby Dick target at Crippleback, part of the company's Treasure Island project in central Newfoundland. The headline number is 0.54% copper equivalent over 180.8 meters, including high-grade core of 1.48% copper equivalent and 49.4 meters. The company is calling it a new grassroots copper gold porphyry epithermal discovery. The news has an accompanying video on YouTube. Search for Pirate Gold and subscribe. Joining me now is Denis Laviolette, CEO of Pirate Gold, to walk us through the results. Denis, welcome to Mining Stock Daily.
Thanks for having me back, Mike. I'm so excited to be here. What a day. It's a very, very exciting day for us over here at Pirate Gold. So perfect day to catch up.
You're calling the news release, or what you mentioned in the news release, a new discovery at a zone first identified in 2024. Walk us through that, Denis. Is that the geology or the assay confirmation on that discovery?
Well, it's a whole bunch of things, Mike, because realistically, like, what exactly did we know going into this? And what we had at Crippleback Lake was some showings of copper. In fact, there was only about 10 documented mineral occurrences in the region. And Tim Froud, who's the president of the company, Tim in 24 honed in on this area and drilled a small hole, or a small round of a few holes in the area, just sort of like a handful of holes in the region. And what he got was a bunch of smoke. And we talked about that, I think, in our last interview, where he had all of this anomalous kind of sort of anomalous copper, gold, and silver values. Moreover, mostly what he hit, though, was really kind of distal, sort of more vein hosted-y stuff. So like he had a lot of sort of smaller intervals of higher grade copper, etc., which is sort of what you get on the distal parts of these sort of systems. So if you can imagine, in these high sulfidation epithermal systems, you get this huge blowout of alteration and mineralization, and then sort of these little tentacles that come out of it. And that's what sort of he had originally found evidence of. And with that, you can kind of surmise, based on the molybdenum, the copper, the gold, the silver, and a lot of the mineral suites that were associated with mineralization, that there was a porphyry in the midst. And so we evaluated all of that. And one of the big things that we did is we went and digitized 495 maps. We digitized 1,200 historical till samples that we found. Another 1,600 rock samples were located and digitized over the region, 24,000 soils. And in doing all of this, we ended up identifying an extra 100 showings across the Crippleback intrusive complex, which it expands the footprint of mineralization to 32 kilometers by about 8 kilometers. And just in the last few weeks, we ended up adding an extra 79 occurrences through our prospecting. So when you go from like sort of 10 showings to all of this data compilation work yielding a much bigger and widespread footprint of mineralization, one of the things that we had also done is we had flown a electromagnetic survey, which lit up this area as a conductor amongst many other areas. And so what we did here is we drilled in a brand new spot, targeting that conductor. And what we hit was effectively a 590 meter wide clay altered mineralized zone. This is, all of the hallmarks are there of classic high sulfidation epithermal system. As we transition from, argillic, which would be the most distal part of that system, to advanced argillic. And so what we've got today is actually incredible numbers in the advanced argillic. So we're nowhere close to the core yet. I guess we're close to the core somewhere, but we're vectoring in on the core of this system where we expect grades and yields to be better, but we're still, working in the distal parts, and the distal parts are giving us, perceived economic quality mineralization. So this would be mineralization that, would pass the mustard in the world of sort of deposits that you can compare to out there in the high sulfidation universe. And so, it's an incredible validation. It is truly a brand new grassroots discovery, which, really almost doesn't happen anymore. So notwithstanding one that has such an immense footprint, 32 kilometers by 8 kilometers. There's only 4 billion ton plus copper systems on the planet. And suddenly now Crippleback's on the menu. It's on the bingo card of systems that could play out to be extremely huge.
Talk about that narrowing in. So the holes that you did highlight were 58 as well as 68. They were drilled from the same pad. Talk about what that means in terms of like the orientation that you had on those drills and how you are in terms of, like, as you say, you're narrowing in on what you want to focus on.
Well, the goal of the first one really was to try to drill across this sort of central structure that runs through and has the conductive response, and that kind of sits under the Crippleback Lake itself. And so we came to the shore of that lake and we drilled the first hole, and we had it quite steep. We knew we were in for a deep hole, so we said we're going to have to drill a real big deep hole here, and let it run and see what we get, and see if we can get across this sucker, and then we'll come in from the top and drill it back the other way. That was kind of the plan. And as we started to drill, we realized that, this zone, in fact, is likely dipping away from us because we kind of maintained into that advanced argillic alteration, that distal alteration, for quite a ways in that first hole. And then as, we were getting deeper and deeper, it would be, the zone's almost getting away from you, so you're sort of staying in that distal portion. So what we did was we drilled a second hole from the same pad, and we flattened that hole out to 45 degrees. And that allows us to get across more rock. It allows us to shoot the hole out farther and get more of a cut and get across that lake. And that's when we ended up hitting basically a 200-meter zone of advanced argillic alteration. And, things transitioned. They started looking a lot better. We were getting more sulfide, etc. And the mineralization and alteration looked a lot stronger. And so that's what we got in the second hole. So the first hole sort of skirts things, and then the second hole, really, really gets across things. And then, of course, we did get elevated values proximal to where that structure should be, which makes all the sense. That's the way these systems are architectured, is that you've got these structural conduits that, are the main hydrothermal fluid conduit in these systems. And so the thesis was, if this works and we do, hit mineralization where we have this big conductor, if we hit structure where we see the structure, if we see the values elevate, then that reinforces our thesis that these massively widespread structures, like this structure alone, extends all the way for 12 kilometers to an area called Coronation Pond. And Coronation Pond has all the same hallmarks as Crippleback. Like, it's the same argillic alteration that's described, copper and gold mineralization on surface. In fact, a lot of even higher grade values over at Coronation, and that's 12 kilometers away. And then all of a sudden, with all of this data compilation I was mentioning in our work, we started, unearthing more copper along that structure between Crippleback and Valentine Lake. And of course, the conductivity still coincidentally lines up with that structure. So whatever this is, it's really big. It's bigger than just Moby Dick. Just Moby Dick alone is sort of the main zone that we've been drilling around Crippleback Lake. And that is 3.1 kilometers long now, by 850 meters wide and 500 meters deep. That's the dimensions of the white whale.
Now, in drill hole 58, you did mention one instance of visible gold. Where was that along the interval? What is the significance,
Well,
Denny?
that ends up plotting almost exactly where the structure would come through.
Mm.
So the visible gold ended up plotting effectively almost right in the middle of the, sort of highest grade section or 200-meter zone. And we ended up hitting what we thought was the structure. You start seeing a little more shearing in the rock. You start seeing a little more texture that you're looking for representative structure. Still nothing really super obvious. Like it's not a super obvious structure that jumps right out, but it is there. And that's consequently where we got the visible gold to boot. So we know that is that sort of axis of enrichment. And now it's going to be about tracing it shallower and tracing it deeper and tracing it along strike. So we've got a lot of strike to play with. We've got, like I say, 12 kilometers of strike to play with. But just within the Crippleback intrusion, like I'm talking about, or sorry, just between that, the Moby Dick alteration halo, and that's defined by 4 holes. And those 4 holes are like kilometers apart, or, hundreds of meters apart, that define that overall envelope that we have right now, which again is open-ended. But that's what we've got so far with the current drilling. So we've got a lot of fill-in to do. We got a lot of spots to do. So the next move here is we're going to be stepping out from those holes, stepping out on either side of those holes and hitting Moby Dick again. And seeing how the grades change, etc. We've got a barge lined up so that we can get on top of that lake and start drilling out the shallower horizons. It's kind of tough because the best part of our target sort of sits underneath the lake, and so we're limited from trying to drill it from a distance away from the shores, and that's resulting in rather deep intercepts. So we got to bring this all up to surface. And so we got a barge out there that we can go float around on and stick the rig on and start popping some holes into the shallower horizon.
I remind listeners, if you go to the YouTube channel, you can look at what you're targeting, as well as the lake, and then also looking at what you're focused on there, because it provides a good visualization. So, just talking though, Denis. So, you do have you're orienting your drills right now for and then looking at Moby Dick. But what also is in the lab right now? Is there anything that is pending more that's coming out of this?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, the drills haven't stopped. We got lots more drills turning. There's obviously a lot of holes behind this that have been drilled that we've got in the lab. So, investors and onlookers alike can expect lots of news from us in the weeks and months to come as that stuff trickles out. The analytical process with this stuff was quite extensive, especially our first few holes. We really threw the kitchen sink at things, but we didn't stop. Obviously, we had visuals. We knew what we were into, and we kept things going. So there's going to be lots more follow-up on step-out holes, things like that, to come.
And then also in terms of the barge and then putting this in, what's kind of the timeline for that in terms of starting to drill?
Barge is in.
Yeah.
So that's already started. So we've already been at that. So I don't know if we've officially started a single barge hole. I think the first one is starting today, I think, barge holes. But, we had to order the barge and get it and all that kind of stuff. So the other thing that's a target that we can expect news from that we'll discuss, I think, is going to be the actual Valentine Lake itself, which is proximal to this whole area. So about 1 kilometer away from Moby Dick, you end up with where the Valentine Lake fault basically transects or undergirds this entire Crippleback Lake intrusive complex. Now, to remind listeners, that is the same setup as what you had over at Valentine Lake. So Valentine Lake has 6 million ounces located at the contact of the fault, and where the fault basically comes into contact effectively with the Valentine Lake intrusive suite, which shares the same DNA as the Crippleback Lake intrusive suite. So, so the fault itself is a target. And of course, on the north side, we have the North Arm fault, which is, subparallel. So you have this huge 32, well, really it's a 40 kilometer by 8 kilometer intrusive suite that's bounded by 2 massive crustal fault features on each side. On the north side is called the North Arm, and on the south is the Valentine Lake. And so we've also got drills working on those targets. And so we can expect a market update in time to come, pending obviously success and results on those things to disclose. So that's our sort of 2-pronged approach to tackling this issue. We've got the coincident occurrences of a orogenic gold environment with the Valentine Lake and the North Arm faults, as well as a high sulfidation epithermal porphyry environment within the Crippleback intrusion itself.
Denis, help us kind of wrap our whole minds around this. Stepping back from Crippleback, stepping back from Valentine, you do have a 50,000 meter program that you're running. You have the other projects that you're running on this. What are those targets? How are you prioritizing, and what's the news flow going to look like?
Well, Moosehead is our sort of flagship project today. Moosehead is located about 50 kilometers north of this area, and it's right on the side of the highway by Grand Falls, Windsor, and that's got about 650 drill holes in it, and it's a high grade, a little more narrow and discrete, but high grade, really, really high grade orogenic gold veining system. And then we've been growing that out and discovering new satellites and stuff to expand on that story. But with the recognition of a couple of things, seasonality, vis-a-vis, when the best time is to drill Crippleback versus when the best time is to be drilling Moosehead. Moosehead's kind of got year-round, no friction issues. Crippleback, there's a lot of swamp and water and stuff, and so if you're going to be frigging around with barges and stuff, it's better to do it in the summer. So we're going to allocate more drill horsepower to Crippleback and still keep Moosehead alive and pressing forward. But we've got another area between called Stony Lake that we're really chomping at the bit to get into. Stony Lake's a really interesting target for us as well. It's not very far away. It's only 8 kilometers or so far away from Moosehead. So that's a really, really neat spot that I'm looking very much forward to getting in and drilling. I believe we got our permit on that as well. So that's all looking really, really, really nice. So there's lots on the regional to expand on, but right now Crippleback is an all-you-can-eat buffet for mineralization and targets and drilling. I could foreseeably see, a half a dozen rigs working into infinity on the Crippleback complex.
Remind us again, Denis, what is the drill season there? When can you drill?
Well, you can drill year round. It's just that it doesn't really get a cold enough winter to freeze lakes. So sometimes when you get areas that are a little bit swampy and a little bit water rich, it's better when things are frozen. You can move around easier and drill things a little bit easier with a little less logistical hurdles versus, Newfoundland, which is sort of temperate, believe it or not. You get sort of all the seasons in one day, but they just don't get the real deep cold that you need to freeze lakes over. And so that's the only real seasonality here, is that it's not to say that you can't drill Crippleback in the wintertime. You can, of course. There's plenty of places that's not a problem at all. And there will be year-round drilling there. It's just that the flexibility to hit everything in the summers, it's a little logistically easier versus Moosehead in that region, which is, there's not a lot of water. It's pretty dry. It's not super swampy, and that can be worked, winter, summer, doesn't matter.
Denis, it's a big project. You've got a big drill program that you're running. Let's do takeaways right now. What are the 1-2 things that you want investors to focus on that is coming from Pirate Gold?
Well, first of all, we hit a absolutely humongous copper and gold system, which is a unicorn in and itself. Number 2, we've only got 3 holes in it released. And so investors need to ask themselves, what's the likelihood that we drilled the very best stuff first? That we got, the best results this is ever going to have on the first holes? And in my opinion, the likelihood of that is statistically near 0. So there's going to be a lot of different flavors of mineralization and different things to unveil as we progress and sort through all of this. And so I just want to remind everybody that there's only 4 billion ton plus, copper deposits around the world. They're extremely rare. Almost anything like what we're looking at Crippleback has a Spanish name. This is like the only thing that doesn't. And so of this scale and magnitude. So it's a very, very peculiar setup, but stay with us, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with really how much potential an area like this can have.
Denis Laviolette, thank you for speaking with Mining Stock Daily.
Well, thank you very much, Mike.
The information presented should not be considered investment advice. Mining Stock Daily and its affiliates are not responsible for any loss arising from any investment decision in connection with the material presented herein. Please do your own research or speak with a licensed financial representative before making any investment decisions.